Welcome back to my channel. My name is Chaz Kayado, and the topic of today's discussion is student loans. So this specific video will be about student loans in relation to traditional students exiting high school and looking to get into college, whereas the previous video that I made was specifically about adults in terms of taking out scholarships. Taking out student loans, that 25 plus crowd that we would consider, more adult learners. But this is more of the young traditional college student, the older teenager, the younger person in their 20s that is going to generally a brick and mortar, although not necessarily, as we're seeing online colleges, increase and surge in popularity. So I'm going to go through some statistics, and then I'm going to go through some of the thoughts that I have on taking out student loans. And you'll see that much of this is actually very similar to what I said in the previous video. But I just want to go back over it. Maybe some of the other people didn't look at it because it didn't apply to them per se, because maybe they're younger. But let's go through some of these ideas. Okay. First, I want to start off with some statistics from the Education Data Initiative. So, first thing, the average debt for a college student now in 2025-26 is over $43,000. Over $43,000 of student debt, average student debt. Now, we know that some people are graduating college with almost zero debt. You have to imagine that there are some people out there that are graduating college with, over $100,000 worth of debt. And, I have seen that, especially when it comes to people that are going to med school, law school, there are definitely some people out there that are getting close to $200,000+ in student debt. But the average is going to be $43,000 as of right now. And we're going to talk about how that will possibly change in the near future. Total student debt in the U.S. is now at over $1.8 trillion as of 2025, and it's going up hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, actually almost every single quarter now. So it's also important to note that these numbers are outpacing inflation, and outpacing somewhat significantly. Actually, since the turn of the 21st century, the cost of education has increased over 41% faster than just traditional inflation. So the cost of education is going up quicker. So the average salary is being tied to roughly inflation, and education is going faster than inflation. What it costs to get a college degree now is significantly more expensive than it was when your parents went to college, and then significantly more expensive than when your grandparents went to college. So, if you follow the same plan to pay for college that your parents and grandparents did, you may come up short. And I'm saying you probably will come up short, because just looking at the cost, this is like in terms of actual purchasing power. Everyone knows, obviously, over time inflation. Yeah, $2,000 40 years ago. What does that cost today? You look back and say, oh, that was cheap. Well, inflation, right? But what we're saying here is that the cost of education has far outpaced inflation. And actually now the average tuition and fees per year, almost $19,000 per student. Okay, so this is including public and private school together, but still, it's a significant chunk. Matter of fact, looking at some future statistics, Northwestern Mutual, in a recent article, said that they expect by 2040 the cost of an in-state public school 4-year degree will be over $250,000. And then the cost of a private 4-year degree is going to be over $600,000. They expect it to once again continue to far outpace inflation. I mean, these numbers are just insane, right? So, who will be able to afford that in the future? So, so we know that the cost of education is going up. We know that people are not making, or they're making less than, if people are making essentially an increase in their salary based on inflation, and this thing's outpacing inflation, education just becoming more and more and more expensive, right? Well, that doesn't even account for the fact that wages aren't even keeping up with just regular inflation. So, what's going to happen? Does that mean that in the future education is only going to be for the wealthy? Does that mean that education is going to be something that just generally is just not as deemed as important? Well, we already kind of see that happening. The demographic cliff, we've talked about that. We've hit it. There's going to be less 18-year-olds now than there were a few years ago in terms of those entering, leaving high school in the United States. Well, so that was already something colleges were thinking about. There's less 18-year-olds. We need to be more competitive than other colleges to get kids in. But then on top of that, people are looking at these numbers. They're looking at the cost of 1 year's worth of college at almost $19,000. They're looking at the average debt of over $43,000, and they're saying, why go to college? What is that degree? Is that degree going to make me more money, or is it going to actually make me less money because I'm going to be in a lot of debt? And so we're seeing more and more kids say, maybe college isn't for me. And so, what does that mean? What are those consequences long term for education and for society, in general? So, so now let's talk about some things that you need to consider when you are planning for paying for college. And once again, this is for the traditional students, not necessarily adult students. First thing is you have to have a game plan. Okay, figure out your game plan in high school. So, you have multiple ways to pay for college. One might be that you have set money aside, saved money during during high school, during previous years. Specifically, parents would be doing this most likely, right? So you have some money there, and that money it's already saved, so you should be able to count that in. That should be no problem at all, right? Your next thing that you need to think about is how much scholarship and grant money do I have available? You don't have to pay these back. Okay, this is free money, and many states will offer scholarships to graduating high school seniors that stay in state, right? So you need to do your homework, and you need to figure out how much money that you have available through your state that you can apply for college. Remember, this is free. You don't have to pay it back. And there are some people out there that between scholarships and grants, which you also don't have to pay back, they're leaving college with zero debt because they didn't have to take out any loans, just because of those two things, in addition to what they saved, right? Okay, so another one is work study. That's working, or just even a job. If you work a regular job in college, can you work and pay for college as you go? Because once again, you're not taking on debt, you're paying for it. I mean, yes, you take on the debt of that semester, right? But you're paying for it as you go, and you're not getting yourself into long-term debt. So some other things you need to think about: how much college can I get paid for cheaper than a regular the rate? Okay, so what I mean by that is, can I transfer any credits in from things that I did in high school? Okay, did I take a DE class? Did I take an AP class? Do I have any tests that I can take, any CLEP tests that I can test out of a class, which would be much cheaper than actually taking the course? That's a way to get by and get grades. Get credits cheaper. Can I go to a junior college for a couple years and then go to the bigger college that I want to go to? Take the cheaper classes early on. Okay, this is all part of your strategy. Another thing when it comes to planning long term is what career path do you think you're going to be in? Because if you think you're going to be in a degree path that doesn't even require a degree, you may need to reconsider trying to take on a lot of debt. Okay, you don't really need to take on any debt. If you're just going to college because it's an interest for you, you're interested in expanding your education, but it doesn't actually expand your job potential, then you need to consider that. Do not put yourself in a situation where you have a large financial burden and it doesn't actually help you make any more money. So understand your return on investment that you'll get from your degree. For instance, I know that if, let's just say I'm at my current job for an extended period of time, I know that I broke down the ROI, the cost that it would, the cost that I pay for tuition and whatnot for my master's, I would get that paid back 3 years. In 3 years, I would make more money because of increased, how I'm getting increased pay. So in 3 years, I knew that my ROI after that 3 year time, I would be in a better financial situation than I was if I had not taken the master's course. And then with the my doctorate course, I know that it would be 8 years, and that is only if nothing changed, right? If in the future there may be an increased bonus for having those degrees, but that's just if everything stayed exactly the same. My ROI, like I knew how long, I understood the return on investment for getting those degrees. But you need to ask yourself, does this degree actually get me anything? Am I getting only debt? So let's talk about the debt too. So if I've exhausted scholarship, if I've exhausted grants, I've exhausted the amount of money that I had saved up prior, and I've exhausted the amount of money. I can't make any more money while I'm a student, right? So maybe I've maxed out my hours at work, okay? So what do I do there? Well, then the next option would be to go ahead and take loans. All right, so you would want to look at federal loans. Now, what I would recommend that only ever use those federal like the federal loans, only ever use loan money to get you across the finish line. Do not use that as the standard to pay for your education. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you know that the degree that you're going to get definitively is going to make you a lot more money. It's going to be a springboard. It's going to make you a lot more money by having that degree. If not, there's really no reason to get into debt. Slow down the classes that you're taking. Try to pay for college as you go. Okay, but it just does not make a whole lot of sense to get into a ton of debt for no financial benefit. You could look at things like, can I go to school locally and live at home? Can I eat at home? Are there other things I can do to reduce the amount of cost of going to college? I know most people, most college students, they're looking forward to that liberation of finally getting out of the house. But the reality of it is more and more young people are staying with their parents longer and longer anyways. So I don't even know if that's really something that most people, it might not even be something that most people even care about anymore, considering most people live with their parents until their late 20s, early 30s now. So just think about that. So you need to determine what your wants and needs are. So, what do you need to pay for to get through college versus what do you want to pay for? Maybe you can't afford to go on vacation while you're in college. Maybe that's something you have to cut out in order to make the ends meet and get from point A to point B. But one of the positives I will say about the loans, and once again, I'm only talking about loans that get you to the finish line, that that are not necessarily what you're using to pay for the vast majority of your education, but you can use them to build credit. So if you take on a little bit of loan debt, that's actually fine, because when you pay it back, it'll help build your credit. So in that sense, don't be too disheartened by having to take out some student loans. It actually can help you out financially long term. But once again, if you're taking out so much that you can't pay it back on time, it's actually hurting your credit. Doesn't do you any good. So overall, my what I recommend is exhaust all those other resources. So you have several: money saved before college, money made during college, scholarships, grants. If you can pay for college as much as possible with those 4 things, try not to go to loans. Okay? We don't know what the future job market holds. We know that the job market right now is not as good as it has been in previous years. We don't know how long that's going to last. We also don't know with technological advancements what job fields are going to suffer in the future and what job fields are going to flourish. So it's kind of risky to take on a lot of student debt right now when we don't know as much about the future. And so those are my thoughts on student loans for kids right out of high school. If you have any comments, please keep those down below. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you for watching.